So while we're waiting for the interwebs to come back alive, let's talk about your website and meaning your course project. Some of you have reached out to me and said, "What is this supposed to be?" Well, this is your creation. Okay, you have to follow the checklist and make sure you're answering all of the questions correctly on the checklist, doing them on your own website. Okay. The template provided is an example. Please don't turn in the template. Okay, I'll just let you know I'm not going to grade the template. Okay. You turn in your own assignment, you trade out, put your own pictures, your own color, your own design, your own website. Do not turn in somebody else's. We're all adults, right? We don't do that. Right? Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit about what we have going on this week. Continue to work on your course project. The due date for this is not Sunday. However, if you get it done by Sunday, that's fine. I've extended it out to November 20th. That is next Wednesday. Okay. Your discussion forum. Most of you have been responding to it. What is Web 3.0 versus Web 2.0? Okay. Some of you didn't even know there was a Web 3.0 or Web 2.0, did you? You just thought it was just the web, right? Remember, the initial post was due yesterday. If you haven't posted yet, please post. Please spend the time researching and doing that. Your final post are due this Saturday. Your course project presentation. Yes, you're going to present your website to the class. Okay, that's going to be next Wednesday. Now, if you feel that you can't do it, I need you to produce for me a video doing your own screen capture on your own laptop of your website, answering all the questions. If you're scared to death of standing in front of other students, okay? I need you to make those available to me, okay? Y'all can do that, right? All right. So if you need to do that, you need to communicate with me in advance. Send me an email and say, Mr. Rogers, I'm just going to submit a web screen capture of my video talking through the features of it, the audience, and so forth. All right. Let's talk about the presentation. These are the 4 criteria I'm looking for. Uh, no more than 4 minutes. All right. The reason for that is there's 19 of us in here, and that will take us up to an hour and 20 minutes, and we only have an hour and 30 allotted for the class. So only 4 minutes. Be prepared to talk through your design choices, why you're doing what you're doing, why you chose the color scheme. Um, Talk about the purpose of your site. If your site is about a restaurant you're going to open, or a menu, or a list of music that you like, or art that you're interested in, talk about it. Okay. What the purpose of your site and how it will benefit the world, because your site is going to be available to the world, right? Huh? Yeah, but the world is available to drill down. Yeah, the whole world will see your site. In fact, on your free hosting, they already see your site, believe it or not, right? So I know, don't stress out. I've got sites I created and they're down, and I'm like, I don't, whatever, right? But you can't do that for this class. You got to be able to say, yes, here's my site, all the buttons work, images, links, all of that, all right? Then be prepared to answer any questions from the class. So someone in the class says, so can you tell me why you chose that font style over this, or why you, or how you did that? Can you tell me how you got your page to do this particular functionality? Be prepared to answer. Okay. All right. The Thanksgiving week, November 28th, we won't have class. You guys are sad, right? Yeah. But what I'm going to try to do that week, because I'm still required to have hours available for you all, I'm going to post a midterm reviewer online. It'll be like an online quiz that you could go through and take and prep yourself on. It won't be the exact. I said midterm, didn't I? It'll be a final exam reviewer. You could take as many times as you want. Kind of go through. It'll tell you what you got right, what you got wrong. I'll have that hopefully available. Excuse me. The week of Thanksgiving. And then our final exam is December 5th. It'll be here in the class from 2 to 5. You have to take it in here in the class. All right. So, does anyone plan on being gone on the 5th? Some of you might like, yeah, I'm going to be gone on the 5th. I'm just not going to tell you. Right. If you're not going to be here, you need to have a doctor's note or a legitimate excuse why you're not going to be here. Okay. Those are not my rules. That's the college. All right. Any questions so far? No? You guys are not scared, are you? Yes. Hmm. No, you don't have to say this is a font and this is a piece of this is an image and no. Yeah. Yeah. Well, the checklist is running you through everything that you should have been able to master for this. And really, if you've gone through the textbook and you've kind of walked through, you're there. You guys are ready just to go out and build all kinds of websites. And if there was a step two for this class, I would recommend WordPress. Does anyone know what WordPress is? Okay, it makes things a lot easier on developing sites. Um, but that's do not use WordPress for your final project. Okay, I won't accept WordPress. I need to be able to see your HTML code and all that. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Let me see if we are back to online yet. Can I take attendance? Yes, I can. All right. So Steven's here. Yes? Hang on. It's decided to go a different direction on me. Oh, why is it doing this? Okay, who are we missing again? Jessa, Gabby, and that's it? Okay. Has anyone seen Gabby today? Is she around? No? Okay. Let her know that I'm going to try to get the video posted tonight. I'll have the slides available as quickly as possible, and so she's not caught off guard. Oh, good golly. All right, we'll just come back. Did it load? There we go. Hallelujah. All right, Christopher, Julian, Gabby is absent. You guys like watching me click the button, don't you? Trying to make sure that your name is present. Is that it? All right. All right, Zach, you're absent, right? Okay. All right, she already called in, and he is withdrawn. Okay. Let's go back and talk about uh, today. All right, so again, here's the links for the alternate free hosting. If you haven't written those down or taken a picture or whatever, please, it's a good idea to try to hit those up and test it out at least. Create the account. It's pretty much the same process as for the 00 web hosting. Um, Just make sure you get your account, your username, set up your password, make sure it has available FTP and those things so you can use FileZilla. Okay. Testing, debugging web pages. So, does anyone know the term debugging came from? So, I have this cool story of this good pastor friend of mine. He used to work in Fort Knox, Kentucky. And this was during the days that when they would program the computer, they would have to get a stack of cards and they would manually punch each of the divots or tabs, whatever they call it, on the card. And each of those tabs and divots on the card would be read manually by the computer and have these pins that would stick into the divots that are missing. And then that would represent like a bit, just one bit, right? And so he went through and he was going to propose to his wife, and so he thought he would just do this really cool thing. He would propose to her. And so he had this stack of cards and he handed it to her. And he says, "I have something I want you to read." And she looked at this stack of cards. It was like 300 cards. And she's like, "What is this?" And he says, "Well, you'll have to come over to this computer." And the computer was like, it was like 5 of these classrooms from ceiling to floor. That was one computer. And it had this little device that you would load these cards, and she would have to load them one at a time onto the tray, and he would read it in. And you could hear it just clank, 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 doing all this kind of stuff. And then when it was finally done, after an hour later of loading cards one by one, it printed out this message on a piece of paper. It said, "Will you marry me?" You ladies, would you have waited that long for the message? It's like, man, you really make me work for it, right? All right. Back in the day, though, when they would talk about debugging code, the way you would debug code is you would actually open up the computer and you would have someone who climbed inside and looked at all of the registers to see if there was actually any moths or grasshoppers or flies that had flew in and got stuck between the electrical relays, and they would have to scrape them off. That was called debugging, literally. Great job, right? It's like, 120 degrees inside this computer. It's hot, and you're having to take a paint scraper and debug relays. The first time it happened, I believe it occurred where this lady that she loaded the program, and it just didn't run. She couldn't figure out what was going on, so she went inside, and there was a moth stuck to a vacuum tube, and it burned out the vacuum tube. So she had to then go and make sure there was no more bugs. And so every day after that, before they ran the program, they had to go in and debug before they turned on the power source because vacuum tubes were expensive. All right. Well, so we've moved a lot further today than you getting a paint scraper or climbing inside of a computer. Now debugging code is a lot easier, but the process in some ways is very similar. You have to look at it line by line, stepping through the logic, figuring out what's happening. Now, albeit with HTML and CSS, it's not as difficult as, say, pulling up some JavaScript or Java code or C++ or any of the other languages. But debugging, it's this process where you have to step through and figure out what's going on. So today we're going to look at how you can validate your code, how you can test your pages, some different debugging techniques, and just checking things in general. And then we'll also move into website deployment. So you have your HTML, you have your CSS, maybe some of you started to dabble with some JavaScript, and how do you test it? Well, let's say that you do all of this on the Chrome browser and it's running fine, and then your friend comes along and says, "Hey, Christopher, can I load your what's your website you made? And you're like, oh yeah, here it is. And he gets on his phone and he starts tapping it in. And he goes, dude, this is nasty looking. What are you doing? And you're like, no, because you spent hours working on it. But it doesn't work on a different browser, let alone a handheld device. Okay. So how do we do that? All right, well, what is code validators? So a code validator, you point the source of your HTML and your CSS at it, and it just churns through it, and it has all of these rules, and it validates it for you on the fly. What they do is they compare your HTML, your CSS against different language rules, and it'll spit back for you errors and warnings, and hey, this is not a good idea to do that, or this this is actually going to be deprecated in the next version and whatnot. They'll tell you if the content you're using is the best. It will even give you how to write your HTML semantically better. Okay. One example of this is the HTML5 validator. Okay. This is just one side of many, but really what you do, this one's based on the idea that you have created your site somewhere on the internet, and you just give it the page. So you load up the page, the whole URL in the browser, meaning not something local, but something out there that you've put on a website somewhere. You load up that page and you paste that URL on the site. And when you paste it, you can click these options and say, give me the report. And what it'll do is it'll actually go through and it'll tell you every single bit of error within your HTML. Now, you may be thinking, well, how come my browser doesn't tell me this? Well, sometimes your browsers just ignore the errors and they go on, but other browsers are more strict about it, and they'll fail out. So using this is a good way to help your code be cross-browser compliant. It's very easy way to do it. Um, and then of course you can go in and fix in your source code, rerun the test, and do it again. Another type of validation is consistency. Um, Code consistency is a good practice. For example, let's say that I write some code one way where my images include the slash greater than symbol. In another place, I don't include the slash greater than symbol. I'm being inconsistent. Or let's say that the order of the attributes within my image tags, I switch them around all over the place. Well, your browser doesn't care. But if you're not consistent, when you go back and start looking at your code and you're asking the question, why isn't something working? Because you haven't been consistent, you're not going to see the error as quickly. So they have these consistency checkers out there called linters. There are JavaScript linters, there are CSS linters, and there are HTML linters. There's linters for all types of programming languages, even SQL. For those of you who just got out of your database class, you can get a linter to check the consistency of your SQL to make sure it's valid. Linting was actually introduced at AT&T by one of the first C++ programmers and Linux programmers. And it was derived from this name that they would use when they were pulling wool. Has anyone ever seen someone take a wool brush and they're brushing the wool from a lamb? No one's ever done that before. Anyone ever seen it before? It's actually very interesting. They'll take the hair off the wool, off the lamb, and they'll start brushing it, and it tangles the wool all up. And then they take it and they put it on a spindle and they spin it, and it makes thread. Well, sometimes there are these strange hairs. It's great background noise, isn't it? Sometimes there's these strange hairs that get into the lint, into the wool, and they want to delint it. Yeah, we need a denoiser in here, don't we? All right, so linters, that's where it comes from. And, Java developers, computer guys are all geeks and nerds, and they create all kind of weird names for things. All right, so this is a site that does both validating and linting. It's called freeformatter.com, and check your HTML for consistency as well as validating it. These are some other sites. Of course, you've got the validator.new, you got Freeform, you got validatorw3.org, and then you got this CSS validator. All of these are great sites to grab your CSS, run them through it, and it'll catch a lot of the errors that maybe you um, didn't think about or you just missed. If the tools are available, I recommend using them. Okay, it's big time saver. All right, so testing in general. Are they like right outside the door, or are they upstairs? Wow. Okay. All right, so testing in general. Just some basic common steps. You open up your website. Does the layout and everything look correct? Just general testing, right? Look at the layout, the formatting. Is your H1s all this large font and your paragraphs the smaller font? Is there consistency between your fonts across the page? How does the page how does it look in general, right? Do all of the URLs and links on the page point to a correct site? When you click on them, do they actually go to the place that you expect them to go to? Do all your images appear, or do you get that little question mark, right? Are they aligned properly? Are they sized properly? And then looking at the responsiveness of your pages. Um, and then once you do this, you want to fix your changes, save save your change and refresh the browser and do it again. All right. Then think about testing your workflow. So you're coding in for Chrome and you're just testing back and forth in Chrome and you're like, well, what does it look like in Safari? Do you have Safari downloaded? What does it look like in Firefox? Sometimes it's a good idea to have 3 or 4 different versions available. Now, if you're like me and you have a Mac, you don't have Internet Explorer. So how do you test in Internet Explorer? Well, there's a couple ways you could do it. You could go out and create a free Amazon Web Service account and stand up a virtual machine and just test your website that way. Or you can use VirtualBox. Has anyone ever heard of VirtualBox before? You can actually stand up what they call vagrant instances of an OS on your desktop and then test those within the different browsers. Alternatively, you can use something like Browser Stack or Sauce Labs. And what these sites do is they validate your code against multiple browsers and laptops and tablets and devices. And they say, yes, it works great in all of these, but it really sucks over here in this group. It'll tell you that. These are great sources to use. Okay. And both of these are free to try. So usually they have like, sometimes you can use validate 10 files for free, or they give you a month of free time or whatever. So other than that, just have a bunch of email addresses on hand. Okay, ignore that one. There we go. So what are some debugging techniques you could use? Check the easy stuff first. Don't try to go tackle all the hard stuff on your page. Just go through and just check the easy stuff first. Work incrementally. And this is even true if you watch me when I'm doing the homework assignment in class with you. I'm doing the code, I'm saving, refreshing the browser, coming back, writing some code, saving, testing in the browser. Do things incrementally. Don't try to write the whole site and then go back and test it and go, why is it not working? Because then you're out of scope. You don't know what you've done, and it takes a long time to figure it out. When you're debugging, start with what works first, and then add the more complex and difficult things. So if you don't know how to do a complex task, maybe it's some type of CSS gradient that's going to bounce when you hover over it, get all the other stuff done first. Don't try to, fixate on the difficult thing and then you run out of time, right? Get all the easy things done first. Then you can come back and make all the bells and whistles and everything work. Usually for your boss or for your client or customer, getting the 90% done shows them that you've actually done the work. If you fixate on some small detail and can't get past it, you're not. It's not good. Okay, even with in the software development range, if you get stuck on something, skip over it. Get all the other things done first, then come back and work on that one little item. And you'll find anyways that that taking a break from something that you're stuck on, getting up, going for a walk, talking to someone else, doing something different, it refreshes your mind, then you're able to actually focus. Use process of elimination. I used to work for Joint Interagency Task Force South out of Key West, Florida. They were a group that is an interagency group. We had the FBI, the CIA, the Army, the Navy, the Coast Guard, all of these, and we had what they also called the Five Eyes. We had Great Britain, France, and some other eyes. I forget which countries they were. But anyways, they would interdict drugs coming in out of South America, and we were writing this code for them. And my program manager had given us an incredible, ungodly due date to get all this done, and we were constantly running into bugs in our code. And sometimes we didn't know where the bug was at. And one of the things that we found that we could do is half the code, meaning we comment out half of the code, we refresh the page, and see if it still works. Process of elimination, right? So if something's not working on your page and you can't figure out why it isn't working, just take half of the code, comment it out, refresh the page, and go, nope, it's not that piece. Uncomment it, do the other half. And if you find it's in that piece, then you can half it again and half it again until you isolate it. It seems kind of trivial or silly, but sometimes it's the easiest solutions that are the best. So halving the code. Other thing you can see an example here. Here's with the CSS. We got half of it that's commented out. So you can test your CSS that way. All right. Another area is checking for spelling and typos. Do you know what they call it when you enter the wrong password when you're typing? Hold up your fingers. They call it fat fingering it. Now, I'm not saying any of you have fat fingers, okay? I got in trouble in the Army because I told my commander, I said, oh, sir, you're just fat fingering it. He said, what? I was like, you just entered it wrong. No, 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 you said that I was like, sir, it's just what we call it. Sometimes you type things in wrong, right? Sometimes you get a letter wrong here or there. So go back and check your spelling, especially if you give a class name for a CSS class name, and you say George. For some reason, you call your class George. It's easy to misspell things, okay? So check your spelling, check for typos. All right, debugging tools that are available. Every one of these browsers has debugging tools available in them. In Chrome, you generally just right-click on the page. In fact, let me give you an example here. I'm going to exit out of this. And let me find a site that's going to load for me. Here we go. All right, so say I've got this link here and I want to figure out how I can analyze that link. I can right-click on it, go to inspect, and now you'll notice that as I hover over this, it highlights the element on the page so I can actually isolate it, okay? And then I can do some other cool things. I can edit the HTML. I can say doodah, right? And now I've edited that page locally so I can test things. This is one form of debugging. In HTML in Chrome, you have the styles over here. So I can come over here and I can edit the style and I can say color is going to be pink, right? I'm debugging, I'm doing things in the fly. As well as I can, with JavaScript, it has a console at the bottom. And so I can literally do things like jQuery. Uh, let's see. And now I've caused all of the HTML, all the links on the page to disappear, right? So there's all these tools available in your browser you can use right down here on the in the debugger. Chrome has it. Let's see, I'm in Chrome. Safari has it as well. Firefox has them. They're all available for doing different types of debugging operations. Now, the other thing you can do, of course, is you can set breakpoints. And does anyone know what a breakpoint is? Yeah. So let me go back here. This is really not pertaining to you guys, what we're doing in class, but uh, you go into the sources and you pull up something like, there's not a lot here for me to access. All right. You come over here and you just click on it. That's called a breakpoint. And what happens is you can see the breakpoint is attached here on this return statement. When I refresh the page, depending on how this is called, it will pause and it'll pause right on that code, and then you can come over here and click step over or step through or whatever, and you can analyze the code through the breakpoints. So all of your browsers, they have these tools available for you for debugging things. All right, so let's talk about easy mistakes. Um, ensure you're testing the file that you intend to. So you've just been working on a page and you think it is mypage.html, but really what you're looking at is mypage.htm. They're two different pages. So make sure you're testing the file that you intend to test. You could be working on this file and refreshing the wrong page in the browser and asking, why isn't it working? Well, you're not looking at the right page. Upload the file that you intend to work on. Pay attention to what you're doing, right? You get the file, you save it, and then you make sure you upload that file. That sounds very condescending, doesn't it? Pay attention to what you're doing. All right, upload the file where you intend it. Make sure that you identify the location you're trying to upload it. Make sure you upload that file to the location. Make sure the file you uploaded is correct. I'm dealing a lot with the file, but a lot of times, 9 times out of 10, when you're working on an HTML file, a CSS file, any type of programming file, you could be looking at the wrong place. So it's important that you look at those. Look at the auxiliary files associated with it, like the CSS, the JavaScript files, or any other includes that are there. Here's a big one, uppercase and lowercase. Sometimes this happens with images or with class names. We get comfortable in a Windows environment where we think that the file you name in Windows doesn't care about case. But in the real world, case matters, okay? Uppercase, lowercase, it matters. You could change a file name, and just by changing a letter, the casing of that letter, it matters. When you go to look at it, it won't recognize it. And then, of course, make sure you open up 2 different browsers, test it. Use an HTML validator, CSS validator. Check for typos. Think about in your CSS. Here's some examples here. Check the use of the colon versus the equals. In your CSS, This is always the correct syntax. Use a colon between your pair values, your your key value pairs. Don't use equals. That's incorrect. It'll ignore it. Make sure that each property pair has a semicolon at the end of it. So if you have multiple property key value pairs, they all have to have a semicolon separating them. Don't add spaces between your numeric value and your type indicator. So if it is a PX, make sure it's right next to it, no spaces. If it's an EM, make sure it's right next to it. Curly braces, these are always important in CSS. Kind of go through, make sure you have curly braces associated with each style class indicator. Ensure that you're using acceptable values for styles. For example, font style equals none, that, that's not correct. The actual correct syntax would be normal, or the actual name of the font. Well, and this not for font style, but it would be normal, right? Don't forget that if you have embedded style sheets on your page, that you have the closing style tag, opening, closing. Ensure that the path, I've hammered on path statements a lot throughout this class. Make sure that the path where you're pointing to is correct for your CSS. And then, does your browser support the CSS? If it doesn't support it, then you get these weird errors where things don't seem to work correctly. Again, use the browser tools for interpreting what's going on. If we go back here again and we look at this example over here, when you're looking at the console, it will tell you in here what's being overridden. And you can see in this instance that the display block is overridden. The browser will tell you that. And it's very helpful because you may be looking at something and go, why isn't it working? And then you look at it and you see that it's struck through. And it's actually the browser that's done that. That's interpreting it that way. So use your browser's interpreting skills, meaning this debugger console. Okay. By the way, when your page loads, you'll see down here in the console what will be potential errors. If you have a lot of JavaScript on your page and things are not working correctly, check the console and see what's happening. If there are JavaScript errors on your page, and the console will tell you, and if there are, the page won't load correctly, and you may be scratching your head wondering what's going on. Check that debugger. Okay, it'll tell you a lot of interesting things. Another area you can look at in here is, for example, this is very valuable for detecting path issues. All of these images and JavaScript files and CSS files that are being referenced in here, they all have a path they reference. And so you're looking at them, and what you want to see is a status code of 200. 200 means yes, I've got it. And a 307 is an internal redirect, and you can see mostly there are 200s in here. So check the network, and as the page loads, it'll tell you right away where things are broken. All right, let's go back in here again. Okay, easy mistakes that can be made. So again, I've talked about checking the path. Make sure that the image exists where you think it does. Check the casing. For example, some of you may have an image that says Victoria in capital V versus lowercase v. It won't. They're two different. It's two different pointers there. As well, check to make sure you have the correct extension. Sometimes we think that .jpeg is the same as this JPEG. They're different. All of the extension types, all of these matter. They're very important for making sure your images show up. And then publishing pages on the web. All right, any questions so far before we get into that? Debugging techniques. I know I'm losing some of you. I see some of you intent on your phones and other areas. This can be a little dry, but I think you'll find this is invaluable, especially as you look at this your course project over the next week. Okay. Any questions so far? All right. All right, publishing your web pages. So who in here has actually bought their own domain name? Yeah, what is your domain name? Say again? Ma- MacTow? Awesome. .tech. 99 cents. Which register did you go to? Hostinger? Yeah, awesome. Anybody else bought a domain name? Your husband did? What's the domain name? Ah, to make it easier. Yeah. Make it easier for people to, yeah, yeah. I had a church website many, many years ago for a church I belonged to in Kentucky. And we were trying to find a way to make it unique and identifiable to the community. And so it was faith, LJ, let's see, ljky.org. And people went, LJKY, what is that? KY was Kentucky, but it was all, there was no dots in between it. It was just all one. And so then a couple of years later, um, these top level domain names came out and they added these new top level domain names. You all know what a top level domain name is, right? The TLD, the .com, the .tech. .tech is actually a new top level domain name. Uh, as of about 4 years ago, those names didn't exist. In fact, for the longest time, the only ones you had available were com, edu, net, org, and gov. And then out of the blue, it exploded and they created top level domain names for all of the different countries. So then you had a .us, you had um, JP, yeah, P8, yeah, you know what I'm talking about, right? One of the cool ones was this, I think it's Vanuatu, right? I think it was Vanuatu. Anyways, their top level domain name was TV. And do you know that their entire economy is supported by leasing out the .tv? You know what they lease TV for, don't you? For TV, right? Everyone wanted to have, their website video service to be a .tv. And so Vanuatu, they leased it out. And they make actually pretty good income leasing out those names at a higher level than. So each top level domain name, like the countries, those countries are responsible for them. All right, so you got IP to DNS. Do you guys know what that is? So you have your domain name, and you use this thing called a domain name service, and it translates based on the IP, whether it's a IP4 or IP6. All right, so each of these computers in here all have an IP address assigned to them. Okay, every device in the entire globe, all the way down to your cell phone, they all have IPs on them. Some of them are static, meaning they get that IP and they get that IP for the foreseeable future. Others are dynamic, and all of what we have in here is dynamic. As soon as you leave the building, you go somewhere else, you go down to Mango 6, you hop on their Wi-Fi, you get a new IP, right? Inside of these, there is a physical address on these devices. My watch has a physical address. This physical address on my iWatch is unique. There is no other physical address in the entire world that has that physical address. Your phone is the same way. If any type of web ready device, they all have unique physical addresses. And the last count that I heard is they still have another trillion or so usable physical address spaces. All right. So the way this works, you get on the internet, your physical address is registered to the router. The router says, okay, I see your physical address or your MAC address. It gives you an IP then you're able to IP route throughout the internet and surf the net. All right. A domain name is attached specifically to a static IP address, a public IP. Again, that IP address, though, is again linked back to a MAC address. So if I go to find Google on the internet, I can find it one of two ways. I actually know Google's, well, one of their IP addresses. It's 8.8.8.8. It's actually a great way to test if you're trying to figure out if you got access to the internet. You can just do a ping 8.8.8.8, and if it responds, you're up, right? Whatever website domain that you buy is going to take that domain name and it's going to register it to a virtual host on that computer, which is then could be a number of virtual hosts to that IP address. All right, I've told you a lot. You guys, your eyes are glazing over, right? But that's how it works. The domain names are all controlled by ICANN. It's the international something. You're like, Mr. Rogers, you should know that. You're the instructor. I don't. I just know it's controlled by ICANN. I haven't really cared about the actual abbreviation, what it stands for. You can lease those domain names for 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. I have a domain name called mdrsolutions.com. I got it back in 2005, and I put my web resume on it. And then about 6 years later, I got contacted by this company, and they said, hey, we see you have these domain names. Would you like to let them go? And I was like, how much? There's actually people making money out there registering domain names. They go out and they look at the political climate and they say, I'm going to register the name McCain.org. You remember who McCain was? Yeah, he used to be the senator who passed away a couple of years ago because he was running for president. Obama. They register the domain name. And then people actually they squat on these domain names and they make money. They resell them, and sometimes they resell them for $40,000 and $50,000 just the domain name. For example, Edwin, right? All right, you bought yours for 99 cents. If you get a unique enough domain name, you can actually hang on to it, and then someone may go, "Hey, I'd like to buy that." You're like, "How much?" Right? You can make some money off of it. All right, so you need a domain name. Now, the way the domain names work, 000webhosting.com is a domain. The .com is the top level. The 000 web hosting is subdomained off of the top level domain. And then your website is actually a subdomain. I'm getting is a subdomain to the 000 web hosting. So you could have a subdomain on a subdomain on a domain, right? And they're all separated by dots. In a folder structure, that would look like this. Com is the first directory, and then the next directory is the name of that domain, and then the subdomains are other directories below it, right? And typically, that's how it works on a web server. You'll have a server with 5 or 6 domains. Each of them have their own folders, and that's how they kind of keep track of each other. All right. Edwin, you went to hostinger.com. That's your register as well as your domain that you bought, right? All right. So registrars are everywhere. They're ubiquitous. You can just Google and find them. You could do a search for mytv.com, mysite.tv, mysite.church, mysite.org, on and on and on and on and on. There are thousands of them. The only ones that are reserved that you have to get special permission to use are edu and gov. And gov is reserved only for the US government. Aren't we special? You won't find the Canadian government with a .gov. It'll actually be gov.ca. Yeah. But it's only the US. And the reason is because we developed the internet. I'm not trying to be egocentric here, but it's the truth. The US developed the internet, and that's how it all worked out. ICANN is supposed to be international, but right now they're still managed by the U.S. Congress. So there's a lot of questions out there about the UN saying, hey, you need to give up control of that and make it global. And politics aside, it's just the way it is right now. Okay. All right. So once you got your domain, you connect with your hosting provider's DNS, and you basically register the domain to your hosting provider's DNS. So if you don't buy the domain name connected with the hosting provider, it will take up to 24 hours to transfer the domain name to the hosting provider. So Winnie, your husband bought his some time ago in the past. Typically, you sign a contract with a hosting provider, and they say you got to stay with us with 1 year with that domain name. At the end of that year, though, you could go anywhere with that domain name. You could re-register it and go anywhere. Or someone could contact you and say, "Hey, Winnie, we'd like to buy your domain name." And you could sign some paperwork, and within 24 hours, your domain name disappears off of your server and it's assigned to another server out on the internet somewhere. Okay. It sounds complicated, but it's really not that complicated. Hosting providers will give you sometimes they'll give you unlimited subdomains, which is useful if you're just trying to create better organization of your website and manage the files better. They also give you email servers sometimes. So do they offer you an email server with your website, Edwin? Mm, cool, cool. One of the things you can do, I used to manage all of the email addresses for Grace Christian Academy, and that got to be a nightmare because everyone wanted to keep all of their emails with all of their images, with all of their files on my email server. And within the space of about a month, I ran out of storage on my server and my server crashed because, it's not in front of my face every day. I'm not looking at it. So what I found out you can actually do for nonprofits, and this is what NMC does, is they have what's called a Google site. You can register your site, or you can actually pay to do this as well. You can register your site with Google, and Google will handle all of your email services. And all you do then is just you go on you go on your site, change the domain, the DNS settings to point to their Google servers, and it all the email traffic then is forwarded through your DNS server to theirs, and voila, you don't have that problem anymore. You can also Googlefy your email addresses, and this is all getting out of scope of this class, but if you have typically when you get your own email account through a server like that, like Hostinger or any of the others, it doesn't provide any spam protection, and it is a headache. Your email just fills up automatically with comedateme.com or it's ridiculous. And so you can Googlefy your email addresses to use Google's spam protection. You just have to have a Gmail address. You go in and change some things, and you can have your Hotmail go through Google. You can have your NMC email go through Google, all in one email account. And you get everything. Anyways, all right. So some things to keep in mind for your hosting provider. You want to keep in mind your disk space. So if you have a site that you're allowing people to upload images, be very, very careful that you set a limit on how many images they can upload, and you have some type of TTL on those, time to live. Those images have to expire, otherwise you'll run out of disk space. Bandwidth, technical support. You want to think about whether the hosting provider has a backup plan. Backup strategies are invaluable. I'm not kidding you. I've lost so many websites because I thought I had a backup strategy in place, and they said, no, you didn't pay for that, so we didn't back it up for you. So you want to make sure you have some type of backup plan. You want to look at what type of server-side languages are supported. Typically, all of them will support PHP, just out of the box. They'll support some CGI, but it's nice to have where they'll support Java and maybe Node.js, and maybe they have a IIS server for the Windows side. Those are all nice to have. Think about the database servers they include. 99% of them all now come free with MySQL Server. MySQL Server is a fantastic industry commercial database that ranks right up there with Oracle. Um, a lot of e-commerce goes through MySQL or its spinoff MariaDB. And by the way, if you're still wanting to practice your database skills on a more professional database, MySQL is a great option, and you can do that through your hosting provider. I recommend it. All right. Publishing, uploading your files. If you choose a hosting provider, make sure they have FTP provided. You may be thinking, well, shouldn't they? Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they only provide file transfers over HTTP, and that can be very painful, especially if you have poor bandwidth. Um, you could use SCP over SSH, which is a lot faster than FTP, but there's a little bit of a learning curve there. In general, you want to use FileZilla or some other tool, and there are a lot of options out there. All right, someone say hooray, he's done. Okay, any questions so far? All right, please ensure that you upload your course project. You need to send me the files, but you also, and I need everyone to hear me when I say this, you need to send me the files, but you also need to upload them to a server. Okay? This is part of your course project because I'll be checking the server to make sure I can access it. I can go through all the pages and see all of the beautiful work and the fantastic imagery and videos and typography and all the wonderful content you've created. Okay? Seriously though, you need to make sure you upload it. If you have any forms, make sure the forms work, that you have the appropriate PHP script in the background to get them. All right. Any questions? Any questions about the course project? Any difficulties you guys are running into with the course project? Huh? Let's. You're getting there? Okay. All right. Please send me an email. If need be, I'll set up some type of virtual conference room and we can all meet and kind of work through difficulties again before next week. All right. By raise of hand, who in here is probably going to do a video screencast instead of a class presentation? You know what I mean by video screencast, right? So you've got some type of video software you're recording and talking into a microphone, right? Okay. So everyone's gonna present. Are you excited about presenting? No? Okay. Okay. All right. The remainder of the class, we got about 25 minutes. I'm available to answer any questions or problems maybe you're having with your course project. Um, Otherwise, next week, be prepared to present. Woohoo! All right. All right, guys. Thank you.